students start working on trying to actually combine sentences. And I'm going to have to maybe switch over to the bigger screen if we're actually going to try to do this activity. This is my other activity for the day. Their answer to everything is using a coordinating conjunction and a comma. So you would have to spend some time talking about other ways to actually combine sentences. So inserting words and phrases, things like adjectives or positive phrases. Instead of having two sentences with two subjects doing the same thing, creating a compound subject. Subordination is a big one. So instead of having simple sentences or compound sentences, making complex or compound complex sentences. Kernel sentence activities like the one that I have up on the screen, which is a student, quote unquote, student summary, writing assignment of a chapter, the first couple chapters of Divergent, is something that you could create, or you could have students specifically do, like, write a summary of something using kernel sentences like this. So you have real student writing, and then as a class or in small groups, you could have them actually figure out ways to combine the whole thing into a paragraph, or you could give different groups of students different chunks of the sentences, different numbers of sentences. So one group could get the first three, another group could get the next three, et cetera, et cetera. Something else that you could do is make sentence manipulatives. There was a picture on one of the quiz slides that I had earlier where there were little beads that had words on them. That's kind of the idea with the sentence manipulatives, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend writing words on beads. You can actually make either word-based, clause-based, sentence-based manipulatives where you put individual words on a slip, or a clause, individual clauses on slips, whole sentences that would be in a paragraph on individual slips, and then give other little pieces of paper that have punctuation on them and give them to students in baggies or something like that, and have them actually spread them out on their desk and move them around and figure out different ways to actually combine elements. Even older students, even high school students, like manipulatives. I have done word level, like individual words, and had students make sentences out of those and think about content, and it helped us identify subject and verb, and that worked pretty well. I've also done, taken a whole paragraph and broken it down into sentences and had ESL students even do that. Though if you do something like this with ESL students and you do it on a sentence level, transition words help them figure out the order that things go, but that's even an activity in and of itself. So sentence combining can be something that you do together, you know, with an Elmo. You can do it on the board. You can have students do it with the manipulatives. So there's a lot of different ways to mix up the same idea and have students actually work with the words. All right, do you guys feel like doing another activity? Because my idea, instead of just having me lecture at you, was actually practice this. So again, the idea of we need to know how to do these things if we're going to have our students do these. So I actually have real sentences here that we could practice combining in a variety of different ways. You guys up for it? Would you rather I move farther in the presentation? What do you think? Did I put you all to sleep? Okay, I've got two. Let's do it. I've got one. Keep going. Anyone else want to weigh in? All right, I've got more people typing. Keep going now. How about this? We'll get a little bit farther at about 8:50. We will probably stop. And then what I will do, I already have a discussion topic for you guys up on Coach's Corner. I will actually attach, here I can even attach, I'll attach the document here and I'll put it up on the Coach's Corner. And if you guys want to take a stab at trying to do the activity and you want to do that, we'll do it at the end. All right, so I'll go a little bit farther. right, so there are challenges to actually using student writing as a source of whatever standard you're trying to teach or whatever rules you're trying to teach. Student writing is unpredictable, and even trying to use published professional writing is harder than it thinks, and you really have to put some prep time in as a teacher to make sure, for example, if you're pulling stuff from a text that you're using, that you go through and you find pages or chapters or whatever you're looking at that actually have enough of the examples that you can get a full activity out of it. It's not necessarily enough to say, well, we're going to look at how fiction writers use a lot of fragments in their writing. So how could we rewrite this fiction writer's poor use of grammatical rules and make it all into complete sentences? Because you may get a sense that overall the text has a lot of fragments, but if you break it down to say 2 pages, you may only have 1 fragment. So you need to make sure that you have what you need. Things that are easiest to identify and have students work with, or to be able to come up with a rule using real writing, would be things like capitalization rules. Basic sentence structure, though be careful with basic sentence structure, because real sentences and real texts are a whole lot different than sentences in a grammar book. So I would make sure that before you jump into real text, if you're trying to get students to look at sentence structure, or even how real writers vary sentence structure, or how the students themselves are varying, that you preview the samples and don't necessarily just pull a paper on the spot. Finding examples of basic parts of speech are also pretty easy if that's where you're starting with your students. Harder to identify the rules are things like spelling. It's really time consuming to do that in real text. And punctuation rules. It might be something that you could have them do, like if you know that you're covering comma rules and you want students to find places where the writing has the comma after that introductory element. Focusing it like that would be a pretty easy thing to do, but just having them let loose on a text and say, find out where they use commas and why, would be really difficult. Trying to identify subject and predicate or parts of a sentence in real writing is definitely difficult, because again, most people don't write like a textbook. So we have crazy constructions, and we don't necessarily write straightforward sentences that make things like subjects and predicates easy to identify. Or if you're looking for certain types of phrases, we don't always write in a way that's going to make those phrases easy to find. That would be a good idea, Victor, too. Yeah, and having multiple grammar books and not just having one that you use is definitely helpful. I mean, our district has 1 set that we have currently adopted, but I think I have probably 2 or 3 other grammar books that I've picked up along the way that I definitely use too, because each book approaches things a little bit differently. Just some other miscellaneous activities that you can do too is ambiguity activities, where you have, find sentences, and you can find these pretty easily on the internet, sentences that can be read in multiple ways, and have them talk about why things are, ambiguous and what the rules are and how they would fix them. Things like daily 2 and weekly 5. So the daily 2, in a nutshell, is basically doing 2 sentences a day that are focusing on a particular language element, a particular punctuation rule, a particular sentence structure, whatever it is, and going over those and having students keep a notebook where they have these daily sentences, where they write them out and then they actually do the notation and the analysis of those on the sentences. The only thing I would suggest about doing this, if you're going to do the daily 2, and I've discovered this because I was doing something similar with vocabulary, having students write out sentences, especially if you need to have sentences that are a little bit longer, it actually can be really time consuming, more than you might think. What I actually had students doing is have their notebook paper, so it was still a couple of sentences a day, or we were doing analogies, so we do 1 or 2, but instead of wasting the time of having the students write them out, because that could really be something that students would drag out for 5 or 10 minutes, I actually typed it up and put them on individual slips. So 2 sentences at a time on a slip, and just, cut them out, and then they just stapled them onto the notebook paper, so they don't actually have to write anything except their notation. So if you only want to spend 5 or 10 minutes on it, then you're actually spending that 5 or 10 minutes on the actual discussion and the notation as opposed to them writing stuff. So that's just a small tip. Individual grammar games that you can find online, if you've got computer access, can be kind of fun. And I think we mentioned, I don't think it was in my session, I think it was Leslie's session talking about Kahoot, which is a site that you can go to where you can actually have students all online. So it's kind of like them having like their own little console, but they just have to be on a computer, and then you can have them actually play games against each other in real time, and you as the teacher can control it. And I had just found out about this, so maybe I'm old and behind the times, but there are lots of sites like this that you can have students go to. There's another one that I found out today from our librarian, where you can actually create like a web quest, like one page where all the resources, like web questy kind of resources, are together. I can't remember what, I wrote it down, but it's on my desk at school. I'll have to try to remember to have that website for you guys for Leslie's session in 2 weeks. But again, there are some resources for some of these on my handout. All right, so that is about as far as I'm going to get. So kind of as I anticipated, did not have a lot of time for the focus on second language learners. So again, I will make sure that that portion of my presentation gets posted with the rest of the resources on the mNET site, so that you guys can go and download that if you're interested in that section. And then I will also, as long as Leslie does not mind, which I'm sure she won't, upload that document for you too if you come to her session in 2 weeks. So at this point, we have about 10 minutes left, and I did post an activity for you guys on the Coaches Corner on the mNET site, and I would ask you to spend the last 10 minutes of our session heading over there to the Coaches Corner and trying to answer that question or that prompt. And I'm going to give you guys the link here. Hold on a second. And I'm just trying to give you guys the specific link to the topic so you don't have to scroll down. All right, so there is the link to the forum. So again, if you guys go there, I will also upload here and there in just a second the sentence combining activity. If you guys have a few minutes and you want to try your hand at it and get some feedback, I will stick around and try to do that as well. You guys have any questions, any last comments before you head over to the forum? All right, no problem. And please don't just log out. Please go to the Coaches Corner and post some comments, have some discussion. I mean, this is what you guys get so much benefit from, is actually having some time to talk to each other. Make sure you download the resources as well. Thank you, everybody. Hope you guys have a good evening.